Alrighty, we are here with Sam Rosen, co-founder and CEO of Deskpass, one of the Deskpassiest companies. I don't get to say that often. No, one of the coolest companies in the co-working space that he'll come across. Sam, so excited to speak to you, Mr. Rosen. How you doing today?
I am very happy to be here, so I appreciate the time and excited to chat.
Perfect. Well, I'm very happy to be here as well. And actually, we're basically family because my mother-in-law's maiden name is Rosen, although it is spelled with a Z, Rozen. So
Oh,
I don't know if there's a little
I thought,
rivalry between the Rosens.
yeah, I thought we were family, but actually we're enemies,
Mortal,
unfortunately.
mortal enemies, Rosens nonetheless. But no, really excited to get to all things Deskpass. But before that, a little rollerblading birdie told me that back in the day, one of the first companies that you started was a rollerblading delivery service. Can you reveal the awesome sick wheels on that one?
Wow, I out of the gates, man. I'm so impressed with your diligence here. That's a deep cut. Yeah, I'm one of those kids who's always had some business and some idea that I've worked on. One of my first and favorite failures was a local Lincolnwood, Illinois. That's the town I grew up in, so good Midwestern boy, suburb of Chicago. And I thought there was a huge demand for a local rollerblade messenger delivery service. So, before Uber, had the ability to send packages, we thought me and a couple buddies could just get calls, hop on our rollerblades, and transit packages and goods from house to house. It was one of those ideas that, seemed really good in concept as like a 11 or 12-year old, but it didn't it didn't pan out, unfortunately.
Was it just because your legs got too tired?
Yeah, I mean the demand was there. I was just I wasn't strong enough. Uh, yeah, no, I mean it was hard to market yourself as a 11-year-old local delivery service, but I feel like with the internet now, like probably a new opening opportunity for this type of service. But yeah, it failed.
Well, there's something about rollerblades that are so fun and just like take you back to like the 80s, 90s, and those, what is it, like the Beverly Hills movies with like the cops on rollerblades and like that sort of thing.
Oh,
So if you picture that and then picture an 11-year-old kid carrying 17 packages, that's a great combination. But I love the
dude,
ingenuity there.
it was a fun idea, and I really appreciate you reminding me and opening up with a with with a tough early childhood failure.
Yeah, of course. Well, next we're gonna get to that Lego set that you never finished. No, just kidding. No, but that it's pretty impressive whenever you hear about kids starting businesses, or at least like you hear about that entrepreneurial bug starting early, even if you can't pronounce it. From your standpoint, what, like, did you always have a history of starting, pretty creative outside the box business ideas like that?
Yeah, my next business after that, which I would say in hindsight is quite a success, was a beat poetry book called Pure Truth. And it was self-published. And basically, I don't think anyone still has copies except for my 96-year-old grandma. So you'd have to go real hard to find that one. I don't think she's giving it up. But there was two editions. There was the first edition, the Pure Truth, and then the second edition. And that I thought was kind of, it was like, truth. What is the truth? Why can't we always find the truth? I hope you find the truth, pure truth. Like that was pretty much the format on multiple subjects. Big seller in the local Lincolnwood community. So we did a follow up, Pure Truth, the new edition, where my parents told me I sold out, which is pretty good lesson for a 15-year-old. But yeah, published a book, sold it at the local Healing Earth Resources, like the local like metaphysical bookstore, made enough money to buy a Fender Starburst guitar. So I'd call that business a win. But I've been since I was a little kid, I've always had ideas and just enough gumption to give them a roll.
No, that's an awesome payoff for anything Fender. But did you how did you at that age get into beat poetry? I feel like you were a poet beyond your years.
My mother is a fine artist. She's a incredible painter. My dad directed television growing up and produced television commercials. And I grew up in this really cool creative household that was very like art meets production. And I grew up with like mid-century furniture and books on like Japanese modernism and Zen philosophy. So I think like I'm a byproduct of my parents and kind of, their interests.
Well, let's use that as a little bit of rollerblading foreshadowing, because I definitely want to dive deeper into that later in this interview. But for now, let's get to Deskpass, which you might think has nothing to do with rollerblades and beat poetry, but obviously those were influential in more ways than one. But co-working, we're recording this at a time where co-working is like pretty well known. It's a lot of people have either co-worked themselves or been, visited a co-working space, or at least have familiarity with it. But that wasn't always the case. Can you explain what that landscape was like in 2008-ish when you started the Coop, the first co-working space in Chicago?
Yeah, man. So, before the Coop and before Deskpass, and still today, I'm a partner, but I founded a design agency. It's called One Design Companies. Wonderful little design, branding, technology agency that does work in Chicago and all over the world. And I was traveling a fair amount. I had a girlfriend who moved not so far from you in South Williamsburg. And I was traveling there every like 3 weeks. And I'd go visit her, and she was and is still a very cool human. And I would work and run my little agency business out of her garden apartment, which had terrible internet, terrible cell coverage, and a thin layer of clothing covering the entire floor.
Oh, and which everybody knows is awful for Wi-Fi connection. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with random clothes and latency. But
good for soundproofing, probably.
Yeah, great acoustics. But basically, I was working. She'd go to her job, and I would work out of her apartment. And this little agency was starting to grow, and we had just had our first project, our biggest project to date for Film Workers Club in Chicago, a post-production company. And we were kicking off the project, and I was in charge of kicking it off, and I was on a call with my colleagues and the client. And I dropped the call like 5 or 6 times during this kickoff meeting. And my buddy Noah, a colleague, was like, "Bro, can't do that anymore." And I was like, cool. Okay, yeah, I can't do that anymore. So I did what any millennial hipster entrepreneur might do, and I went to the local coffee shop, and I love the names in this story, was called The Rabbit Hole. And it was this really groovy little cafe, and I would sit there all day. They had no clothing on the floor, but their internet was not much better, and I would say their cell phone service was not much better. And I would sit there all day. I'd get 1 bagel, 2 coffees, and over time, I could tell they didn't like my kind there. And by my kind, I mean loiterers. And basically, at first it was like, can't use our internet anymore. Like, like no one can use the internet anymore. Then it was like, no computers over, the lunch rush. And then it was like the outlet stopped working. And I was like, okay, I get the point. I'll find a new home. And this recurring figure in my life, Noah, said, "Have you ever heard of co-working?" And I, in 2008, said the same thing that pretty much anybody would say to that, which was, what? And he showed me a Wikipedia of co-working. And that was the most authoritative source on co-working in the world. And happened to be a co-working space a few blocks away from her house, which was called The Change You Want to See. Which in hindsight...
That sounds like an entry from your beat poetry book.
It does actually. That's very true. And I thought that sounds weird. And it was like a gallery that during the day was a nonprofit co-working space, and it was a few blocks away. So I showed up, and they said, "Hey, like go to the space." You're like, "Who are these people?" There's this big table, lots of people, much better internet, quiet places to take phone calls. But the guy goes, "Are you here for the co-working?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Awesome. Got three rules. Um, don't be respectful. Um, be if you're going to take a phone call, take it over there, and don't download any porn." And I was like, "Yeah, I can totally do those rules."
You can
And
get
what
most of
ended up
those.
happening, yeah, I got two out of three of them very easily. And I no, I fell in love with this little place. Like it solved the very pragmatic issues I had around internet and connectivity. But I actually found some really phenomenal people that weren't my girlfriend or her friends. And so I walked into a community of like people in design and media and entertainment and like made connections and made friends and immediately had like new people. And I was like, this is amazing. Who's doing this in Chicago? And the answer was not a person. There was a list of people who were interested, which were actually some really cool people, but no like venues. So my partner and I at the agency were like, let's turn this empty space we had, which was actually my apartment next to an office, and let's turn it into the first co-working space in Chicago. And that's how we got started. And there was already people who wanted to show up, so it filled up really quickly at the beginning.
Well, I mean, you already mentioned porn, but I got scared for a second when you said that you started to say there were no clothes at this coffee shop. I thought you meant like it was like a nudist colony or something. And I'm like, oh, that spans wonderful ideas there. But like many businesses, I'm sure were started that way. But no, you were just saying no clothes on the ground there. But that's like a really, it's overused, but organic way of coming up with a business idea, like an aha moment, because you literally experience the problem yourself and then look for answers. And I can't even tell you how many guests on this podcast, like super successful, awesome entrepreneurs, like went to Google something and it just wasn't there. And they're like, oh, okay, why don't I create this? And so it's awesome that you did it as well. Shout out Wikipedia. But what was, so after that, like what was helpful in terms of making the jump from like, all right, there's clearly a space in the market for this, to, all right, I'm actually starting this, and actually we're going to take this a step further even?
I think organically the co-working space just worked because kind of right place, right time. I mean, some really cool original members like Charles Adler, the co-founder of Kickstarter, Ryan Graves, who was at one point the CEO of Uber, like the fucking, can I swear? Sorry.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
James
we're
Bond,
explicit. You can, yeah, you can even say James Bond.
yeah, yeah, the James Bond like title sequence was done in our like one of the animators was working on it.
No,
So we had this
wait,
really
like
cool group of
one of the
people.
movie or video game?
Yeah, yeah, one of the
Wow.
movies. Not all of it, but like a part of it was cut in our
Yeah,
office, and
like
we just had this
like half a second. No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
it took 3 years, but it was just like, this is amazing. This is a amazing little community and vibrant. And I met like really interesting people that I don't think I would have come across. And it was something that was very obvious to kind of grow and scale. And I think my background is really in design meets technology. So immediately you start going to this place of what type of technology can make this better, And it started with, how do you manage this space? Just do the billing and the scheduling and community, and that's where this path of creating something more in the space other than just a physical co-working space really started.
So where did you see an opportunity to, like, I guess, hint at something closer to what Deskpass is today, like this type of business?
Yeah, man. I think I'm having like a full circle moment recently because I think, again, like being a designer, you really I think, often have a perspective that's different than other folks. And I think co-working is a real estate play, right? Like it's always been a workspace solution. And I think when I started to kind of focus my thoughts on the office, I realized a couple things that are, this was, 16 years ago, but I think that are even more prevalent today, which is offices are pretty empty. They were pretty empty 15 years ago. They might be more leases, but actually like utilization, butts in seats, like it was very clear then that the average desk was sat in like 3 hours a day. And that was considered like fully occupied. I'm no mathematician, Max, but that's like 15% of the day or a full day. And you looked at a city like Chicago and you knew like, you don't have to build another building for the next 20 years. There's enough office here to adopt for the next 20 years. And just that this idea of the way and where we work seemed misaligned with the workers, right? That the office experience had more to do with like your boss and where your boss lives, or like your landlord and like their relationship with the bank, compared to like, what is Max doing today? Where does he have kids? Does he have to pick them up from school? Like, is there traffic? Like, does he need to be creative today? So it just seemed like there was a missed opportunity, and then just a whole ton of empty space. So that's what really got the kind of brain working on like, can you start creating, make this easier for people and create a place for people to share their empty space.
Yeah, the wheels are turning there. No, that's it perfectly makes sense the way to go about it there. And I think if you look at Deskpass today, just like even from exploring the website, you can see like how easy to use it is, how simple the, I guess, value proposition is, and the service it provides. And anybody who has wanted to use a co-working space in the past and hasn't used Deskpass knows that, like, kind of like the start of your story, like you're kind of scurrying around, like, how do we even know where to find a spot? Like, where do I find a conference room or a desk or something for this call? So it's like it's a real solution you're providing there. These days, what's yeah, of course. These days, what would you say is the most common way that people are using Deskpass today? Like, is it more like big scale corporations looking for lots and lots of rooms, or more like indiepreneurs, individual desks? Like, I have no idea what the landscape's like.
Yeah, I think like, it's like the curve of adoption, right? Like the early bleeding edge people were like creative freelancers, like very early remote workers. And then, I think we're sort of past the sort of tranche, and like the chasm, as they say.
Real quick, tranche is an incredible word. I don't know. I've heard trough, but tranche, I think, is a new way of life almost. It sounds good to me.
Let's go with it.
Yeah, tranche it up.
Cut that out. But no, I think what's happening now is COVID really accelerated the understanding of companies that their employees don't have to be in the office every day to get their work done. That doesn't mean they don't have to be in the office. That doesn't mean that the office isn't important. But this idea that like you have to come here 9 to 5 to make a living, I think is probably the most enduring legacy of COVID, right? And the reality is the office has always been this like one-to-many thing. Like we have one office, that's where you get trained and educated, and that's where everybody is in communication. I think what's happening is we're seeing this like many-to-many change, as you saw with like media and entertainment, where it's like, what is the right configuration for Max and his life today might be different than tomorrow, which is probably different than Sam's or Judy's, like, so what you're starting to see, which is really cool, is you're starting companies, some of the biggest companies in the world. We have a contract with the federal government, right? That are starting to say to their employees, look, we recognize office is evolving from just one place you go every day to an ecosystem of neat workspaces where you can get your best work done, and we're going to support you. So that's really what we've been doing, is we've been helping companies and individuals like find this network of space and use it when they need it, like for exactly how long that they need it for.
If you don't mind sharing, what are some of like the bigger name companies, or companies that have had many people use your services, that some people might recognize that are clients of yours?
Yeah, I mean, we have all sorts of interesting customers. I think some that I can like say out loud are like Synchrony Financial, GoodRx. Like we won a contract for GSA, which is the administration hub of the federal government. So you have federal agencies that access our. I think right now USGS is a customer of ours. I hope I don't get in trouble.
We're just gonna set. We're gonna. Well, we can always cut it out, but. Basically, anybody who's an acronym is like, yes, we want Deskpass.
We crush it with acronyms. That's our ICP. Wow.
Now, in the spirit of making me look like an idiot, can you tell me what ICP means?
It's your like the customer persona that you're going after. So it's
there we go. I was gonna guess that.
Yeah. I forget what the I is for right now, but just because I'm on the spot. Ideal customer persona.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. I would just call it ICP, but anyway.
Yeah, way cooler.
Yeah, exactly. But so, what has been key in attracting these acronyms? Like, what has been key in attracting these big name clients and continuing to the snowball with that over the years?
Yeah, I think. This is like the Wild West. This is a new territory. So I think like ideally people get it. They're like, yeah, this makes sense. I think companies are complicated and rigid and sometimes move slow. So there are different companies. Some have been really quick out of the gates to adopt this. Some have adopted it long before COVID, right? But I think companies, what they're, the first thing they do is they say like, what do my employees want? And then they ask their employees. At least smart companies do that. The problem with that is I don't think employees know. And I use this stupid metaphor, but it really like resonates with me, which is like you're working and you have a light switch. And the light switch is in office, out of office. Oh, I should have probably turned off those reactions. In office and out of office. And that's all you know.
For those listening, a giant thumbs up just appeared next to Sam's head. So we are just living in the metaverse here. Nice.
I've been waiting for that to happen on a podcast, and I'll save the best hand signal for last. But so you have this light switch of on and off. And essentially what companies are doing is they're installing a dimmer in your office configuration. And they're saying, how much light do you need? And you're like, well, I only had 0% and 100%. I don't know. Maybe I need 30% light. Maybe I need 70% light, right? So I think like what we're trying to do is make it really, really easy for companies to install a dimmer and not just ask their employees what they want, but give them the option and then understand and learn their behavior. So there's no Harvard business study yet about like the best practices. There's a million emerging thought leaders that talk about this, that like they've been doing this for 20 years. But the reality is, I think just the awareness that these solutions exist, the maturity of the supply, like there's way more awesome spaces. That sure helps. And then, the reality that some people are saying, I'm never going back to your office. So if you want to keep me around, you're going to have to offer me something else.
I dig the dimmer analogy. Like there's so many nuanced situations these days where it just helps to have so many of those individual situations available. And so you're making so much of that possible. How much of that on the, on like the actual physical spaces and like all the different companies that, are co-working spaces themselves that are part of your network, if you call it. how do you create connections that way? And also on top of that, sorry for asking two questions. On top of that, how in the world do you manage like thousands of spaces like this?
Yeah, so we're like a marketplace. We're a connector, right? So we connect these individuals and companies with existing professional folks who do this for a living, right? So, we're a technology company that has figured out like lots of these spaces are different. They use different technologies. They have different rules. They have different pricing. And we've just tried to put like the train tracks down that help connect the dots, between them. That answered your second question, but I don't remember your first.
That makes at least two of us. No, it was more about how do you, like it's one thing to attract customers in terms of people that are actually using these spaces. It's another thing to actually attract these spaces as part of the network. Like how have you been able to scale that over the years?
So frankly, that's the easier part of the equation, right? The reality is like today I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm in the middle of, I'm in K Street, and like I'm looking at these office buildings across the street and they're empty, right? And the same thing in Chicago, probably the same thing in Hoboken, I don't know, but
Hoboken,
like certainly
I like
in, I these offices are changing and demand is changing. So I think there's just a lot more opportunity for these spaces. So you're seeing for a long time, the first gen were people like me and the Coop that would lease a space from a landlord, and it was essentially arbitrage, right? Like I'm paying this rent and I can collect this rent, but I'm on the hook irrespective of whatever happens, right? Now what you're seeing is landlords themselves saying, look, if part of this building has to be flexible and for my tenants to be a competitive building, then I have to do this, and I might do this by building my own brand. So there's landlords that are building their own co-working brands. And then there are folks like our partners at Industrious and a bunch of other smart, savvy co-working and flex operators that partner with the landlord. And they say, look, you've got empty space. I can help fill it up. I can drive revenue to the building and turn that empty space into revenue. But I can also activate this space, build community, and be this awesome amenity for your tenants already, right? So for us, we're driving people and money into their spaces, and they're looking for those two things. So it's an easier proposition than convincing people to get out of their cozy homes into these spaces.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Before any flying thumbs up any more come up, because you got to watch out for that. But thumbs up all around. But you foreshadowed this swimmingly earlier, as we foreshadowed, and the fact that you have two incredibly creative, inspiring parents that have the creative skill set, obviously like careers in the creative space, and of course impacted your own design career, which we'll talk about. But to set the groundwork for that, I know you mentioned that your dad did a bunch of TV commercials and directing, producing, that sort of thing. But I also know that your mom's paintings have a bit of a Hollywood tie as well. Can you share that?
Heck yeah. There are fewer things I like to talk about more. Yeah, my mom is literally I have friends that are artists. My mom is like the artist. Since I was a little kid, I grew up in her studio, and she has thousands and thousands of paintings, and she would paint all day, every day, irrespective of if anyone ever bought one. She doesn't care. That's not why she does it. She's a maker. She got connected to the team at Grace and Frankie, which is the longest running show on Netflix. Their last season, I think, was last year, with Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda. And this, if you haven't seen the show, it's brilliant and hilarious. And in the show, Lily Tomlin is Frankie, and she's a painter. And all of the paintings are hers, my mom's paintings. The studio is like remnants of my mom's studio that were shipped from, Chicago to Hollywood. So that was a very cool thing, and has given my mom really interesting exposure all over the world.
That is one of the best fun facts I've ever heard. And it's not just a fun fact, it's like your mom's career, and it's been seen by what, millions and millions now. I mean, that is just awesome. My wife Dana loves that show, and I know so many are diehard fans of that show. So
it's a great show.
We'll have to make sure when she rewatches that she pays extra close attention to the paintings.
There's a episode that is like Frankie's big art show where they like blew up my mom's painting, and she's an extra in that episode. Oh. So I'd look for that episode, which is like the gallery one.
And then how about your dad? So your dad did all of Grace's painting. No, I'm just kidding. So your dad. So what kind of commercials and things did your dad direct / create?
So my dad was like a very early, Chicago, which was more of a hub for this type of stuff back in the day, less so these days, but would shoot big, $500,000, multi-million film commercial productions for you. I mean, you name it, in like the glory and heyday of commercial filmmaking. So like, I don't know, my favorite commercials are probably most notable were like, for when there was the Michael Jordan, edition Chevy Blazer, and he had like a Chevy Blazer like floating in the air, and Michael Jordan was in the commercial. But he's done all sorts of really interesting, cool commercials, and it was really fun growing up and I attribute so much of like my character to like he would be pacing down the halls producing, and I just of our house, and I just I've loved growing up in that environment.
Did your dad get to meet, we'll call him Michael, as part of that?
Oh yeah, he directed him.
I was going to say that's better than meeting. Does he have any stories from his interactions with him? I just remember asking and him being like a super nice guy. And my dad's actually met a fair amount of, hilarious, like Cal Ripken Jr. and Bobby Cox and like some funny figures throughout the year. Sports
John
legends.
Schmaltz.
Yeah.
Legends.
Did he do a lot of work with the Braves, or is that just a coincidence?
Weird coincidence. I think it was more like the Atlanta lottery.
Ah. All right. No, that's a dream though. Like when you can do something professional, and obviously like with your career, with your parents' careers, like we've talked about very different forms of this, but when you can do something that you love for a living, it's a game changer. And it's like when there's something that you can just be excited talking about, and from your standpoint or from your parents' standpoint, that your son can be very excited talking about publicly, and sharing embarrassing stories. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a really powerful thing, and you're on a good track there. But from your parents, is there, if you had to pick one, what would you say is the most valuable lesson you've learned from them about creativity in business?
I think this is maybe, I think one of the things that I really loved about my childhood, I'm a nice Jewish boy from the North Shore, right? And it was, Sam, you could do and be whatever you want when you grow up. We'd prefer if you were not a doctor or a lawyer. And I think that pretty much sets the setting for how I was raised, right? Like, and I'm a dad, and I think this is a really important value that has been given to me, which is my parents wanted me to find what gave me joy and what lit me up, and were very, very supportive in allowing me to figure it out. They didn't prescribe. I wanted to be a director, you know what I mean? But they never told me to. Like they let me follow my bliss, supported me, and never told me what I could or couldn't do. And I think that is like a really valuable lesson. And I know I have unbelievable privilege to be in that situation where I have that opportunity and that choice, and loving parents who said, do what fills your cup.
That's really special. I mean, that you can literally change your kid's life and trajectory forever when you have that sentiment and support and encouragement. And as a nice Jewish boy from the south side of Solon, Ohio, my parents also had that same sort of sentiment, and were just so encouraging no matter what I wanted to do. Like, if I wanted to go into the corporate world, leave the corporate world, start a business, when I was younger, playing music, like anything, just so supportive and encouraging and helpful along the way. So it's really special when you can be that way. Parent. Now I'm like talking to parents out there. So, all right. on that sappy note, let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Let's go.
All right. Bam. Power clap. Thunder clap even. Let's get wild. If you could only eat one restaurant in Chicago for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Ooh. Rangate. It's a sushi place I grew up going to. Oh, no. Can I take it back? Is it too late?
Yeah, it's technically going to be two places, but yeah, you can. Go for it.
I mean, the most classic, most wonderful restaurant in Chicago is Lula Cafe. And if you haven't been there, it's been there 20 years, and I'd pick Lula. I rescind Rangate. Great restaurant, but more of like a, deep cut.
Sam Rosen gets canceled by Rangate. That's the headline after this one. All right. What's like a physical co-working space in the Deskpass network that is in like a really cool, unique location?
Ooh. So one of my favorite spaces in Denver, there's a space called Furniture, and it's like a triple entendre. I don't know. I might be making that up too. But basically, in the back is a print studio, like a letterpress printing studio, and in printing, what you put on the letterpress is called furniture. But it's also in an old furniture shop that they retrofitted into a co-working space. So I think I just love all the pieces to that story. And it's also a wonderful, wonderful workspace, but it's just like a printing studio in an old furniture shop called Furniture.
Well, it's very, very supportive. Great back lumbar support. Perfect.
Oh,
all
yeah.
right. You, as was actually formative to the business, you said about once every 3 weeks traveling to South Williamsburg to visit your girlfriend. And her clothes. No, I'm just kidding. From Chicago. What advice? It doesn't have to be relationship wise, but what advice do you have for anybody that has to commute, has to travel like that frequently, and make it part of their life? Like, what's the best way to go about that without being burnt out?
I don't know, Max. That relationship didn't work out.
Maybe you have an example that we can use as a learning moment. No, just kidding.
No, man. I mean, like any relationship, man, it's all based in trust and communication. So I like my dear wife. She gives me a long leash and she trusts me. And I'm staying with a buddy, and he was like, "Do you have like your wind up bedtime routine call you have to do?" And I'm like, "Nah, they don't need me. Like this." Like, they don't care. It's fine. We're good.
Actually, I'm going to spend an hour ranting about a place called Furniture instead, so I can't do that tonight. But all right, and then last one. Sorry, kidding. Second last one. What is a hidden gem in Chicago that it's not quite as touristy? You're not going to have the mobs of people taking pictures of the Bean or whatever it's called. I always forget the name, the Bean, but it's like a really cool spot to check out if you're visiting Chi-Town.
So an underrated thing, it's kind of touristy, but it's never busy and crazy because I hate things like that. So growing up, I grew up in Chicago, and everyone's like, "Oh, Chicago!" Like when you go to the city, it's such a beautiful city, and it is. but like I don't know, like in good architecture, like I never really appreciated it. And I um, went to do the architectural boat tour. And there's a few
Yeah.
different architectural boat tours, but there's one that's I think it's architecture.org, and it's by like the like historical like architecture society, and the docents, they don't get paid, they just love it. And you take this, and the same thing, there's a just a river walk, you get the same experience, but the boat tour is really really cool. It's such an unbelievably beautiful, awesome way to experience Chicago. And I remember the first time I did that, I have a little picnic on the boat and like wine and cheese and just being like, oh my God, this is such a beautiful city. If uh, you want to go kind of another really great Chicago hack, same river, is you can rent an electric boat for like a couple $100, get like a Groupon or something like that. And you don't need any training, you don't need any license, you don't need any experience. And you can take a little boat out on the river with some friends and just like rip up and down the river. And that is so fun to do. And just like you, when you're doing it, you're like, I feel like this is not legal, but it is, I think.
Yeah, it can't be legal. No, those are awesome recommendations. We did when we visited my buddy Spence in Chicago last summer. We did actually a little funny story about him. We did a boat tour with him because it's like you got everybody, like you have to do it, and it is awesome. It like exceeds expectations, and the docents are awesome. Spence actually, who lives in Chicago, had a work event the day before where he did that same boat cruise, but he still did it again with us the next day. He's like, oh, why not? And he enjoyed it the second time too. But also throughout it,
That's how good it is.
yeah, exactly. We saw plenty of bachelorette and bachelor parties on those rental boats, and let's just say it's fantastic people watching, if anything.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right, last one for real. You somewhat recently, at the time of this recording, did a merger with Breather, and so you had your company, I guess, is in transition, but it's a really cool thing whenever a company goes through a merger, any sort of big milestone like that. What we don't need you to like spill out all the financial agreements and everything, but maybe your social security number. But besides that, what's just a piece of advice you can share for anybody that is considering going the merger route?
It takes a long time. Um, like I think, look, a merger is a marriage, and you want to really take the time to get to know your partners and the platform and kind of what you're getting into. I think for us, we were really lucky. We Breather's this really cool business that like exploded and then kind of got hit with COVID just in a hard way. And it was owned by Industrious, which is a wonderful, wonderful, second biggest co-working brand in the world. And so this deal formed a partnership between us and Industrious, and then we got this wonderful business in Breather to kind of inherit and try to operate. But I think like you want to do your best to get to know what you're getting yourself into, and then you want to make sure to build like the right long-term relationships, because I think that's what really drives value through and through. But I don't know, it's like as an entrepreneur, as someone who's tried, had some cool, sold a company, been able to buy a company, like it's a really fun thing to like get to like work with somebody else's business in an intimate way. I think as an entrepreneur, you're always just like, I don't care what you say, like you don't know what you're doing. You're trying to figure it out as you go. And it's really fun to like start working with somebody else or another business where you're like, oh, that's how you made it up, right? Like, and this is how we'll make it up together. And so you want to find, the right people to do that with.
Lots of great improvisers out there. Well, Sam,
No
thank you
doubt.
so much. Lots of great poets as well, by the sake, and rollerbladers. But Sam, thank you so much. This has just been fantastic, and I really appreciate you sharing your journey and everything from your mom's paintings to your second favorite restaurant in Chicago. No, just kidding.
It's a banger.
Where is the best place for people to check out Deskpass, which I finally pronounced correctly, and if they want to connect with you somewhere online.
Yeah. So I'm Sam at SammyRosen.com. Go to SammyRosen.com and you'll kind of see all my tentacles. On the Deskpass front,
Sorry,
like,
I took that totally the wrong way. Sorry, go
I
on.
don't know where your mind went. Yeah, on the Deskpass front, like we help companies, small, medium, ginormous, tackle this problem of what they're going to do to support their employees and their team in the future. And that's what we love doing. We have a great team of people to do it. So like Deskpass.com, Sam at Deskpass.com, hit us up. Like we're here to help, even if we're not the right solution. Like I think we have as much domain experience in helping companies figure this out as anyone else. And, that's what we love to do. So just hit us up and we're here to help.
Perfect. And then last thing, final thoughts. It could be a quote, a line of like a slam poetry to end with, or it could even be just revealing one of your tentacles. Whatever you want, send us home here.
Oh man. I think one of my favorite mantras, and I think it kind of fits my little narrative, and it's something my dad taught me, is luck. It's a baseball quote too, so we're really tying it all together here.
Yeah, you're knocking it out of the park.
It's a Branch Rickey quote, and it's luck is the residue of design. And I believe that the most successful people that I know, and it's not an accident. Like there's a lot of luck involved, but putting yourself in the right room, putting yourself in the right position, that's where you can get on base.
Bring on the bongos.